Hi folks, CodeTutor here and my name is Anil Deshpande. Welcome to the another edition of Developer Insight. Couple of days back on my LinkedIn profile, YouTube community page, I had posted a poll basically asking how are they implementing observability. If you are new to the term observability, need not worry, I will talk about it bit later. But poll was something on the lines of, can you answer these questions? That is, how do you track and debug issues in your mobile app? Do you use crash reporting, user analytics, performance metrics, or full observability using OpenTelemetry? And on CodeTutor, this is how the response looked like. 85% of the people reported that they are using crash reporting, 3% said user analytics, 10% said performance metrics, and then only 2% said they are using something on the lines of OpenTelemetry. I asked the same question on my LinkedIn profile and the response was almost very much on the similar lines. The reason why I asked this particular question was I just wanted to get a sense of how you guys or how mobile teams are typically approaching operational excellence. Because when you deploy your mobile applications and it is being used in the large landscape of a distributed system, you really don't have much control over when things go wrong. It becomes very, very important if something goes wrong to be able to quickly track it and fix it. And if you are using Firebase Crashlytics or Sentry or such kind of tools, which are basically user analytics and Crashlytics tools, then the kind of support they provide when it comes to fixing the bugs are very limited. Until and unless you have a monolithic application where there is only one single backend, but in reality the landscape is much more complicated. You have a distributed system, more often than not it is a microservice architecture. In such cases, whenever things go wrong, it becomes very difficult to identify what is happening. And that is where the concept of observability comes into picture. Observability is relatively a very new term. It has been in existence only since 2017 or 18. And that is the reason why, especially in mobile application domain, it is very rarely heard of. But if you talk to any of cloud architects or cloud teams, backend teams, microservice teams, DevOps teams, SREs, then they definitely talk about observability. But the question is, what is observability? So we will try to understand what is observability, what it means, and try to make sense of some of the terms that are used in the field of observability, and then later I go on to talk about why it becomes, as a mobile team and mobile architect, this should be your major concern when you are talking about operational excellence in your teams. If you go on the internet and start searching for observability, these are the pretty standard definitions that you will get. Observability is the ability to measure systems' current state based on the data it generates, records such as logs, metrics, and traces. There is another definition which says that observability is the ability to collect data from programs' execution modules, internal states, and communication among components. Or it is the ability to understand internal state or condition of a complex system based solely on knowledge of its external outputs. But to put it in a nutshell, observability is ability to understand the state of the systems based on the data they emit. So what do you mean by this? So let's try to understand the landscape that we are talking about. You have a mobile application, and then whenever a mobile application makes a API call, it usually hits some kind of a backend. But in most of the complex landscape, you have another intermediate layer which is called as service mediation layer or SML. Service mediation layer basically takes care of rerouting the request to various backends that might actually exist, which is hidden from the mobile application development teams. What might actually happen is, from the service mediation layer, it might go to a API aggregator level 1, and from the API aggregator level 1 to it might go to a downstream API 1, and from there you may once again go to downstream API 11, and then from there you move on to downstream API 111, and then finally you might be actually hitting the database. There is a possibility that downstream API 11 itself might be another aggregator API which is collecting the data from another API connected to another database. In the same way, it is not just one API aggregator that might be available in the backend. There might be multiple API aggregators which might have their own set of downstream APIs. When I say downstream APIs, these might be some other microservices which other systems might be exposing to be consumed by other set of APIs. If you have been part of a large organization and doing mobile application development, this kind of landscape is pretty common and you should not get surprised by this. Now, typically, if everything is going on perfectly fine, then you should get the responses without any problem within the agreed times. But as they say, it never goes as per the agreed SLA. And what happens if you are getting responses very late, or user complains that the pages are loading very late, or the data is getting populated in the mobile application very late? It is taking more than 5 seconds. And in Android, anything that takes more than 4 seconds, you definitely start getting application not responding error, ANR. And that is when the problem starts. Where do you pinpoint the problem? Is the problem between the service mediation layer and the API aggregator? Or is it between API aggregator and the downstream API? Or is it between downstream API 11 and 111? Or is it between 111 and the database? It could be anywhere. You really won't be able to pinpoint where the problem is if you are using simple Firebase Crashlytics or user analytics. With those systems, your whole backend becomes a black box. If I'm trying to compare this to a crime scene or an accident zone, it comes down to our ability to answer a couple of questions. For example, in this case, if you want to understand what has happened, you can ask the bystanders. They should be able to tell you what exactly happened to an extent that they can recall. You are interested in knowing who is the affected party, that also you should be able to figure out to some extent. Where it happened, that can also be figured out by asking the people. And if you need a little bit more details, then if you have a CCTV camera in the vicinity, then you will be able to get more perfect answers to all these questions. And maybe you would be able to even answer how it happened and when it happened with a little bit more accuracy. But in spite of all these answers, it still doesn't answer why it happened. For that, you need some kind of a detective or a police who can basically connect all these things by doing all the necessary work, by talking to different people, correlating it with the CCTV camera footage, and then trying to paint a picture of what exactly happened and why it happened. And this is exactly what I am talking about when I am dealing with situation where suddenly some APIs go down from the mobile application perspective. So if we try to define observability, it is our ability to answer these 5 W and 1 H question. That is what, who, where, why, when, and how. So let's think it in terms of whether the tools that we are talking about, that is user analytics and Crashlytics, are able to answer these questions. User analytics, it does answer the what question, what happened. It detects the user screen events, screen views, and user engagement on that particular screen. Crashlytics detects the crashes, whatever the errors that have occurred. When it comes to answering when it happened, user analytics have the timestamps of the user actions. That is also the case with Crashlytics. The stack traces have the timestamps. Where it happened, user analytics shows where the user drop-off is happening in the user flow in the application. Crashlytics, once again, they capture the device info, OS, app version, all that information. So they are able to answer where it happened. Who is the affected party? User analytics can tell you. It has a segmentation capability. It segments users based on user behavior. Crashlytics also can identify the affected users. Can user analytics answer why it happened? Not really to the extent that we want it. User analytics can only capture what happened on the device. Beyond the device, what happened, it can't capture. So it doesn't track failures, it only tracks the actions. Crashlytics, it only captures stack traces, but it doesn't really have root cause insights beyond the device. So why question is not being answered properly either with user analytics or Crashlytics. Now coming to the last question, which is how it happened, so that we can actually figure out how it could be fixed. User analytics is not at all applicable in this case because it focuses on user behavior. It doesn't really care too much about errors or crashes that are happening on the device. And Crashlytics, very limited to the extent that can be tracked to the device level. It can do that, but it requires a lot of manual debugging from the logs. And if you are talking to your SREs and DevOps teams, then they will tell you that whatever the logs that they are getting from the user analytics and Crashlytics are not really helping them to nail the problem. So if I try to put it in a visual sense, user analytics answers first 4 questions. Crashlytics also answers first 4 questions. That is what, when, where and who. But both of these can't answer why and how in a sense that we really want it to be answered. And that is where observability comes into picture. Let us try to understand some of the terms that we need to be familiar with. The first term that you should be familiar in observability is concept of trace. What is a trace? It is a record of complete journey of a request as it moves through system or systems. As soon as you click a button on your mobile phone and if it triggers a API, you should be able to trace all the calls till the database end gets hit. And then there is also another concept which is span. And what is a span? It is a single unit of work within a trace, and in a distributed system it represents one step. That is, between mobile and SML layer, that is one span. Between SML and API aggregator, there is another step. And then between downstream API 1 and API 11, that is another step. It represents one step in a distributed system, and that is why it is a single unit of work within a trace. In another sense, a trace consists of many spans. Observability allows you to track, trace and spans. I am not talking about how it does it because that is beyond the scope of this particular video. Here we are just trying to understand it at the conceptual level. So let's go back to the table here. So what observability tools allow you to do is they allow you to answer what using the ability to detect the crashes, performance issues and system anomalies. So there they are doing a work of Crashlytics and user analytics both. They have timestamps of all the error logs, metrics and traces. They show which service, that is either mobile, API or database, is causing an issue. So they are able to answer the where it happened question. And then it connects the affected users to the service failures. So it is able to answer who is affected party. And then when it comes to why, because it has a trace which allows you to completely track the journey of the API across a distributed system, it traces request journey to a pinpoint of the exact cause of failure. You can figure out where is the weakest link in the chain. It also has the ability to answer a question of how. It provides the full context. It has logs, traces and metrics. Just by correlating without debugging, you would be able to answer root cause of the problem. And that is the reason why it answers all 6 questions. I hope this has given you some thoughts to think about what observability is. If you are wondering how do I implement this particular observability, I suggest you start reading about OpenTelemetry. OpenTelemetry has been there for quite some time and it is heavily used in microservices architecture. And there are a lot of tools that are out there in the market even for the mobile applications which use OpenTelemetry. So do let me know what do you think about it, and if anything comes interesting, please feel to comment below. Thanks for your time. That brings us to the end of this particular video. Don't forget to like, comment, share the video and subscribe to the channel. Take care. Bye.